Hey warriors, you ever notice how the people you call geniuses aren't the ones who work the hardest, but the ones who move in silence, never show emotion, and stay 3 steps ahead while everyone else fights in the open? You try to be honest, available, predictable, and they treat you like you're disposable. Meanwhile, the ones who hold back, hide their intent, and reveal nothing, rise to the top, and make the rest look foolish. Here's the twist. They're not smarter than you. They're just willing to use laws you were too moral, too trusting, or too emotional to touch. Laws that bend perception, laws that manipulate guilt, laws that punish vulnerability. And the worst part? You feel the difference every time you speak, every time you try to explain yourself, every time you reach out, hoping people will finally see you, understand you, value you. But the world doesn't reward transparency. It rewards mystery. It rewards restraint. It rewards those who can walk into any room without needing approval from anyone inside it. That's why geniuses stay above everyone else. They don't climb the ladder, they remove the rungs beneath them. Before we go deeper, hit subscribe right now. Not for me, for the version of you that refuses to stay predictable, readable, and easily manipulated ever again. Because here's the truth you've been avoiding. The reason others outrank you isn't talent. It's emotional ruthlessness. They don't reveal weaknesses. They don't defend their intentions. They don't explain their decisions. And most importantly, they don't let guilt dictate anything. They understand the first Machiavellian principle. The less you give people to analyze, the more they assume you're above them. Think about your life. Think about the person who always outshines you. They're not always the kindest or smartest. They're simply harder to reach, harder to read, harder to shake. People respect distance more than honesty. They respect calm more than passion. They respect the one who speaks last, not the one who explains first. This is where your transformation begins, not with learning something new, but with unlearning everything that ever made you predictable. But understanding why these laws work is only the surface. The real shift comes when you see how these geniuses use them without ever getting caught. They never announce their moves. They never reveal their strategy. They let people underestimate them because underestimation is camouflage. A predictable man is easy to defeat. An unreadable one becomes a threat without raising his voice. That's why geniuses seem untouchable. They've mastered the art of appearing passive while quietly rearranging the board beneath everyone else's feet. You've felt this before, haven't you? Someone you thought you were smarter than suddenly outmaneuvers you. They stay calm while you rush. They disappear while you over-explain. They hold back while you give everything. And then, somehow, they end up above you. It's not luck, it's law. The first ruthless law they use is silence, strategic silence. They let people talk, reveal themselves, expose their insecurities, confess their intentions. They watch, they listen, they gather data while you're busy filling the air with explanations. The world underestimates silence, but Machiavelli didn't. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. Silence is deception perfected. When you don't react, people begin reacting to their own assumptions. Their fear fills the gaps you leave open. The second law is emotional control. Geniuses don't get pulled. They don't get baited. They never let someone provoke them into revealing their true position. Most people argue to prove themselves. Geniuses argue only when it benefits them. And even then, they speak with surgical precision. You've seen it before. The person who says one sentence that destroys an entire argument. That's not brilliance. That's restraint. The third law is presence. They don't show up everywhere. They don't make themselves accessible to everyone. Their time feels expensive because it is. The less they appear, the more their presence becomes an event. People lean in, people wait, people sense that every gesture holds weight. Scarcity creates aura, and aura creates authority. You've been taught to be open, expressive, humble, available, but these laws reveal the truth. Openness attracts use, not respect. Humility attracts exploitation, not admiration. Availability attracts entitlement, not loyalty. Now ask yourself, how many times have you handed power to someone simply because you couldn't stay silent, couldn't stay calm, couldn't stay away? The answer is exactly why you feel behind. And until you confront this truth, you'll keep losing to people who aren't smarter than you, just more strategic. But this is where the shift accelerates, because once you understand how these laws operate, you can start using them yourself. The moment you start using these laws, the world around you reacts instantly. People who once talked over you start choosing their words carefully. People who dismissed you begin watching you. People who assumed they understood you suddenly feel like they don't know you at all. And that confusion, quiet, subtle, invisible, is your first real taste of power. Not dominance, not aggression, just the unsettling realization in others that you are no longer predictable. Predictability is the death of influence. Every time you explained yourself, every time you reacted emotionally, every time you tried to prove your worth, you made yourself smaller. You trained the world to see you as manageable, controllable, safe. But geniuses understand a fundamental truth. The mind respects what it cannot categorize. The moment you stop being an open book, people stop treating you like a cheap paperback. This leads us to the fourth, ruthless law, the law of controlled absence. Geniuses know when to disappear. They know when to pull back, when to withhold energy, when to create distance so others feel the loss. You've seen it happen. The co-worker who takes a step back and suddenly everyone realizes how much they relied on him. The friend who stops initiating and suddenly you're the one texting first. Presence loses value without absence. Absence without explanation creates power. The fifth law is misdirection, not lies, directional truth. They reveal fragments, never the full picture. They let people believe the wrong things while never correcting them. And because humans hate uncertainty, they fill the gaps with admiration or fear, both useful. Machiavelli warned, men judge more by the eye than by the hand. People believe what they perceive, not what is real. So the genius controls perception. Now think back to your life. Think of the moments when you tried to be fully transparent, thinking honesty would earn respect. It didn't. It made you easy to predict, easy to control, easy to replace. Transparency without strategy isn't virtue, it's vulnerability. But once you combine silence, emotional control, presence, absence, and misdirection, something dangerous happens. People begin reorganizing themselves around you. They start adjusting their behavior, monitoring their words, questioning their assumptions. And that means you're ready for the sixth law. The sixth ruthless law is the law of selective alliance. Geniuses do not surround themselves with everyone they curate. They observe who drains, who deceives, who competes, who submits, who watches. Then they decide, quietly, who gets access and who gets distance. Most people choose friends based on comfort. Geniuses choose based on calculation. They build circles that amplify power, not emotions. They don't keep people who need to be managed. They keep people who understand boundaries, respect silence, and don't demand constant reassurance. This is why you've struggled. You've allowed too many people to pull from your energy without contributing to your strategy. You've mistaken familiarity for loyalty. You've tolerated inconsistency because you valued connection more than control. But Machiavelli makes a brutal point. The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Who you keep close becomes a reflection of your mind. And if your circle is chaotic, your life will mirror it. So geniuses don't keep everyone close, they keep the right ones close. And they keep everyone else at a distance that protects their focus. because focus is their weapon. The seventh ruthless law is unwavering dedication to personal mastery, not perfection mastery. Geniuses elevate through constant refinement. They read patterns others ignore. They sharpen skills others neglect. They study emotions others drown in. They turn observation into instinct, and instinct into advantage. Think of the people you've admired. They stay above not because they chase everything, but because they choose a direction and eliminate what distracts. They don't get pulled into drama. They don't justify themselves to insecure minds. They don't explain motives to people who won't understand them. They're too busy carving themselves into something rare. When you start practicing these laws, people will say you've changed. They'll say you're distant, cold, arrogant. But understand this, those complaints don't come from the powerful. They come from the ones who benefited when you were predictable. And as you rise, you'll notice a shift. Conversations that once made you doubt yourself will no longer affect you. People who once felt intimidating now feel transparent. The noise that used to overwhelm you becomes background static, because you're beginning to see what the geniuses always saw. The game was never about being the smartest, it was about being the hardest to manipulate. And once you become harder to manipulate, the entire dynamic of your life flips. People who once spoke to you with confidence now speak with caution. People who once tried to control you now hesitate. They sense something they can't quite articulate, a shift in your internal gravity. You're no longer the person who reacts. You're no longer the one who explains. You're no longer driven by approval or fear. You've stepped out of the emotional battlefield and into the strategist's tower, where everything looks smaller from above. But with this shift comes something else: resistance. The moment you stop being predictable, those who relied on your compliance begin to panic. They'll test you, they'll push, they'll say things designed to pull you back into the old version of yourself. They'll accuse you of being distant, call you selfish, imply you're not the same anymore. They're right, and their discomfort is proof you're evolving. This is where the next layer of genius emerges: emotional detachment, not numbness, detachment. The ability to feel without being controlled, to hear insults without absorbing them, to witness manipulation without dancing to its rhythm. The emotionally detached mind is dangerous because it can't be coerced, it can't be guilted, it can't be triggered. And people quickly learn they have nothing to use against you. The ones who once intimidated you will start stepping more lightly. Their confidence in controlling you evaporates. They don't know what you're thinking anymore. They don't know where you stand. They don't know how to provoke you. And uncertainty makes them weaker. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are driven by two things, fear and interest. When you master detachment, you trigger both. They fear losing access to you. They're interested in understanding what changed. That combination is what creates influence." Now imagine this in your daily life. Someone tries to argue, waiting for you to get emotional, but you stay calm. Someone tries to guilt-trip you, but you remain unmoved. Someone tries to bait you, but you respond with silence. They walk away rattled because they were expecting the old you, not the one who now sees through them. This is the point where separation begins. You rise. They stay where they are. And the distance between you becomes the space where your power grows. But detachment is only the beginning. Because once your emotions stop controlling you, you gain access to the next ruthless advantage, the ability to control everyone else's. Once you understand your own emotions, you begin to understand the emotions of others. And this is where true power begins, not in manipulation, but in prediction. When you can predict how someone will react, you control the outcome long before the moment arrives. You stop responding to people and start orchestrating them. Most people act from impulse. Geniuses act from foresight. They see the emotional weakness in others the way a surgeon sees tissue: clear, exposed, vulnerable. You start noticing patterns: who needs validation, who fears abandonment, who craves control, who hides insecurity behind confidence. And suddenly, conversations become transparent. Arguments become predictable. Manipulators become readable. You no longer fear people's intentions because you can see through their motives before they even speak. This is the moment you start playing the game from a higher floor. Consider how many times someone has used your empathy against you. They tell you a sad story to excuse their behavior. They pretend to be offended to make you apologize first. They express disappointment so you'll try harder. These tactics work on emotional beginners, not emotional strategists. When you detach, guilt loses its claws, pressure loses its weight, manipulation loses its script, and the ones who depended on your emotional softness suddenly find themselves powerless. This is why geniuses stay above. They aren't controlled by feelings, so they can navigate the feelings of others with precision. They know when to speak, when to withdraw, when to flatter, when to stay silent. They don't argue to win, they observe to understand. And because of that, every reaction they make is intentional, calculated, effective. Picture a scenario where someone tries to provoke you. Before, you would have reacted. Now, you watch their tone, their posture, their choice of words. You see their insecurity hiding under the surface. And instead of defending yourself, you let them expose themselves. You shift the emotional burden back onto them simply by staying calm. They leave the conversation confused, unsettled, doubting their approach. That's emotional control in motion, not overpowering others, but letting them collapse under the weight of their own intentions. And once you master emotional prediction, you unlock another level of genius: the ability to engineer perception itself. Because perception, not reality, is where power truly lives. Perception is everything. People don't respond to who you are, they respond to who they think you are. And geniuses understand this better than anyone. They don't rely on authenticity alone. They shape the version of themselves that others see. They know that reality is slow, but perception is instant. If people perceive you as confident, you become someone they don't question. If they perceive you as mysterious, you become someone they don't underestimate. If they perceive you as restrained, you become someone they don't provoke. Perception is the shortcut to authority. This is why the truly powerful reveal so little. Every time you expose too much, you give people material to judge, attack, interpret, or misuse. But when you reveal selectively, the mind on the other side begins working overtime. They fill the gaps with assumptions, usually assumptions that elevate you. It's basic psychology. What the brain cannot understand, it respects. What it cannot predict, it fears. What it cannot fully see, it values more. Machiavelli understood this when he said, "Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. They believe what they see, not what is true." And the genius uses that blindness to rise effortlessly. They appear composed even when they're uncertain. They appear distant even when they're analyzing. They appear confident even when they're calculating. And because they master appearance, they master how others behave around them. Think about people you admire. Often, it's not because you know them well, it's because you don't. Their mystery fuels your imagination. Their restraint makes them feel elevated. Their silence feels like power. And without realizing it, you start placing them above you. You treat their presence like privilege and their approval like currency. That's the effect perception can have. You've felt it from others your whole life. Now, imagine turning that effect outward. When you control perception, you can influence any environment. Walk into a room with steady posture, deliberate movements, and a calm expression, and people instantly adjust their energy. Speak slowly, and they lean in. Pause before responding, and they wait. Look directly at someone without flinching, and they feel exposed. These are not theatrics, they're psychological triggers. And this leads you to the next ruthless shift. Once perception bends around you, people begin competing for your approval, your attention, your presence, and that competition becomes your leverage. When people begin competing for your approval, the entire social hierarchy flips. You stop being the one who chases validation and become the one who grants it, and that changes everything. Because once others start seeking your attention, they also start policing their own behavior around you. They watch their tone, they measure their words, they avoid disappointing you, not because you demanded respect, but because your aura quietly commands it. This is the hidden advantage geniuses possess. They don't ask for authority, they generate it. By staying selective, controlled, and unreadable, they become the emotional prize in every interaction. People instinctively want to impress them, to be chosen by them, to be seen by them. And when you reach this level, your absence becomes as influential as your presence. A delayed text makes people rethink their approach. A neutral expression makes them question what they said. A shift in your focus makes them compete harder. This competition is not something you create directly. It emerges naturally because humans crave the approval of whoever seems above them. And when you master perception, you rise above without effort. You no longer need to assert dominance, others assert submission. But here's where the true Machiavellian twist comes in. Once people begin competing for your attention, you gain control over the pace of every relationship. You decide when to engage and when to withdraw. You decide whose energy is worthy of yours. You decide who gets closeness and who stays at a distance. This power changes the entire dynamic of your life. You stop being reactive. You become selective. Picture being in a group conversation. Before, you were trying to contribute, trying to be heard. Now, you speak rarely, calmly, directly. And people turn toward you instinctively. They wait for your input. They measure their responses by your expression. You're no longer part of the noise, you're the silence everyone's trying to interpret. That silence becomes your authority. And once others start seeking your approval, something else happens. Their emotional power over you dissolves. They can't manipulate someone whose attention they're trying to earn. They can't guilt someone who doesn't react. They can't control someone who has mastered their own presence. This is the beginning of psychological sovereignty, the point where people orbit you rather than oppose you. But your evolution isn't complete yet, because once you become sovereign internally, you must learn how to turn that sovereignty into influence externally. Influence isn't about controlling people, it's about controlling what they respond to. Once you become sovereign internally, you begin to understand how easily the external world bends to a centered, calculated mind. Most people live in emotional chaos. Their thoughts are scattered, their intentions are inconsistent, and their reactions are impulsive. When someone like you walks in calm, deliberate, unreadable, it disrupts their entire rhythm. They instinctively recalibrate around you because your stability exposes their instability. That contrast becomes influence. Influence grows when you stop matching people's energy and start making them match yours. Speak slower, and they slow down. Stay still, and they stop fidgeting. Respond thoughtfully, and they become thoughtful in return. It's not dominance, it's emotional leadership. And once you realize you can lead emotionally, you understand why geniuses rise so naturally. They control the atmosphere before they control the outcome. Think about the people who influence you most. They don't convince you with arguments. They don't beg for agreement. They don't explain their reasoning 10 times. They simply embody a level of calm certainty that makes you want to follow. That's the power you're stepping into now, a presence that rewires the energy of any space you enter. But here's what most people never learn. Influence is strongest when paired with unpredictability. If people always know where you stand, they stop adjusting. If they always know what you'll say, they stop listening. If they always know you'll forgive, they stop respecting. Predictability kills influence. Controlled unpredictability strengthens it. This doesn't mean inconsistency, it means strategic timing. You respond when it matters. You speak when it counts. You withdraw when necessary. You become someone people cannot anticipate, but must consider. Someone whose approval feels rare. Someone whose displeasure feels heavy. Someone whose silence feels like a message. And the more unpredictable you are, the more carefully people behave around you. They don't want to lose your presence. They don't want to fall out of your favor. They don't want to push you away. They start protecting the connection even when you don't. This is the moment you stop participating in dynamics and start defining them. And once you're defining dynamics, you're only one step away from the final level, the ability to move people without lifting a finger. This final level is where power becomes effortless. You no longer persuade, argue, chase, or prove. You influence from distance. You move people without commands, without pressure, without force, because you've shaped their perception so completely that they adjust themselves automatically. This is the point where genius stops being an ability and becomes an ecosystem. Your presence, your silence, your decisions, your standards, each one becomes a signal that others instinctively respond to. And the secret is simple. People trust what they cannot shake. When you become emotionally immovable, psychologically unreadable, and strategically scarce, you turn into a fixed point in their minds. They begin anticipating your reaction even when you're not there. They imagine what you would think, they predict what you would approve, they avoid what you might reject. This is not control, it's gravitational pull. You become the force they navigate around. Imagine someone making a choice and thinking, what would he say about this? Imagine someone hesitating before texting you because your silence feels heavier than their words. Imagine people treating your time like currency because you've shown them it is. None of this is dominance, it's calibration. You've trained people not through correction, but through consistency. Machiavelli hinted at this when he said, "It is better to be feared than loved if one must choose." But the modern genius doesn't need fear or love. They rely on something stronger, psychological presence. A presence that lingers even when you leave the room. A presence that influences decisions without being part of the conversation. A presence that cannot be dismissed, underestimated, or replaced. And now you understand why certain minds rise above everyone else. It's not intelligence, it's architecture. They build themselves into something rare, disciplined, detached, selective, unreadable, sovereign. They don't participate in the world's noise, they reshape it. They don't seek approval, they generate standards. They don't demand respect, they command behavior. And you? You're standing at the doorway of that same transformation. You've learned the laws, you've seen the patterns, you've felt the shift inside yourself. The world will begin reacting to you differently now, not because you changed externally, but because your inner state no longer bends. Before you go, hit subscribe, comment what law hit you the hardest, and share this with someone who's ready to rise above the noise. Your ascent begins now. A presence that influences decisions without being part of the conversation. A presence that cannot be dismissed, underestimated, or replaced. And now you understand why certain minds rise above everyone else. It's not intelligence, it's architecture. They build themselves into something rare, disciplined, detached, selective, unreadable, sovereign. They don't participate in the world's noise, they reshape it. They don't seek approval, they generate standards. They don't demand respect, they command behavior. And you? You're standing at the doorway of that same transformation. You've learned the laws, you've seen the patterns, you've felt the shift inside yourself. The world will begin reacting to you differently now, not because you changed externally, but because your inner state no longer bends. Before you go, hit subscribe, comment what law hit you the hardest, and share this with someone who's ready to rise above the noise. Your ascent begins now. A presence that influences decisions without being part of the conversation. A presence that cannot be dismissed, underestimated, or replaced. And now you understand why certain minds rise above everyone else. It's not intelligence, it's architecture. They build themselves into something rare, disciplined, detached, selective, unreadable, sovereign. They don't participate in the world's noise, they reshape it. They don't seek approval, they generate standards. They don't demand respect, they command behavior. And you? You're standing at the doorway of that same transformation. You've learned the laws, you've seen the patterns, you've felt the shift inside yourself. The world will begin reacting to you differently now, not because you changed externally, but because your inner state no longer bends. Before you go, hit subscribe, comment what law hit you the hardest, and share this with someone who's ready to rise above the noise. Your ascent begins now. A presence that influences decisions